Welcome, Ghosts, back to Bullet Catcher Gaming. First things first, thank you so much for 10,000 subscribers. We did a little video the other day just to celebrate that. Massive thanks to all of you, from everyone of the Bullet Catcher family. Thank you so much. We've been making a video series recently, which is about what we'd like to see in the next game, breaking it down into small segments so we can really kind of get to the bones of it as such. Sandy is here with me. Sandy's always here on these videos, so you'll be hearing from him in a minute as we go through some more ideas. This one is all about missions and mission structure. So most people, I think, are obviously familiar with lots of the Ghost Recon games, but as we're presuming that Project Over is going to be an open world game, we are fundamentally kind of looking at what would be similar in terms of an open world game as opposed to a more linear path game. So one of those things is obviously missions are really important and how they're structured. In Wildlands, I thought the mission structure, the way the mapping worked, through the bosses and stuff like that, I would be quite happy to see them repeat that. Breakpoint, it was a bit more mixed up. Didn't like it quite as much, though, it was still decent. But what should really be there? What's the core of how this should work? Now, I think one of the most important things is effectively the actual structure itself. So I believe in the next game what we need is a main mission structure, which is based around, bosses, sub-bosses, that kind of thing. But at the same time, just that solely focuses on a main story theme that, you can get sub beats on there, but overall it's got to be main story all the way through on all the main missions. Something so the story's engaging and keeps you going, keeps you wanting to know more things, to learn more things about this world and its characters. It could be finding out things, even a flashback mission or something that you learn something about the main character that you're playing as, whether that's Nomad or someone else. But those types of things I think could be interesting. So then once you've got that, obviously you need an ending, but you don't want a complete ending. Because if you do a complete ending, then I think when you want DLC, I don't necessarily like the format like on Breakpoint that was like, the story's finished, here's some other people who turned up. I'd much rather it would be, well, it's finished, but is it? Is it finished? There's all these other clues that there could be another person behind the shadows or, hiding in the shadows, that kind of thing. I would like to see that so you can then work through multiple DLCs to actually get to another enemy, someone who was actually running the thing all along or something along those lines. But so you need to think about your DLC, I think, and you can't just create it ad hoc and just chuck it in there and hope that it might fit the narrative. I don't think that works. So one of the other things is obviously side missions. Side missions is where you can have different themes. I think you should definitely have side missions, but utilize side missions for finding new weapons, finding out information about main missions, for example. You can't open them maybe until you've done some side missions. But you can utilize all sorts in there. We mentioned this on a previous video. You could even have a couple of kind of fun ones in there, like on Breakpoint about the pirate treasure. That's where you can do those types of things. But outside of that, of course, you've then got, I don't want to see missions like in Wildlands, those repetitive ones where you got to do this 10 times and that 10 times and, drive from there to there and this amount of time. They were a bit boring and repetitive. I don't want to really see those types of missions personally. Let us know what you think, of course. Breakpoint side missions were better, I think, overall. But what are we going to do regards to having missions that you can access every day like we currently have? We know that they binned the rewards for those missions, which, rewards keep people coming back to play it. So that's always a good thing. But I understand that, they can't create hundreds and hundreds, but it'd be nice to have some rewards that are based into the kind of daily faction missions. But faction missions are boring, personally. They're really boring. It's the same places, the same mission types. So we want to have a look at other mission types that we could actually kind of get involved with, some different ones. And you could utilize these within main missions. you could utilize these within side missions and absolutely within faction missions. So you've got your kind of hostage rescues. So, small missions where like your allied nations, for example, your team personnel or aid workers have been taken hostage by hostile forces and held for ransom. And you've obviously got to go and deal with that in one way or another. It could be silently, it could be violence of action, whatever it is you want. Like an emergency search and rescue. So like an allied aircraft of some kind suffers a malfunction, shot down by a hostile force, and your team's got to get in there. You get given a rough location. You've got to try and rescue the crew. And then obviously, deny the airframe effectively, but blow it up. So quick reaction. So you could have like response to backup tier 1 or other tier 1 assets in the region if they're taking heavy fire or casualties. Fallen angel. So that could be something like a friendly required when friendly forces teams on a mission and loses a team member, like a QRF force will be deployed to locate and extract that soldier. So that would be interesting because, some people might be saying, hang on, some of these aren't going to work because it's only a 4-player. We don't know what the new game's going to be on how it's going to work. So we're looking at things that, we're trying to look at the bigger picture, what could be, or the types of things that could be, depending on the story. Obviously, your usual kind of something like convoy takedown, but maybe a bit more interesting than your absolute kind of basic convoy takedown, because I think a lot of people will agree that convoy takedowns they were better in Wildlands. They were really boring in Breakpoint. So just kind of juice them up a bit. So, have armored trucks and that you've got to put explosions on to open up, and and then helicopters come at you whilst you're trying to do that. That once you've hit it, they might send reinforcements there or something. Humanitarian aid, for example, like providing close protection, fire support for allied nations, aid workers, etc. in the region. HVT extractions are a high-value target's got to be captured alive, so you can hand them over to the CIA, for example, so they can get intel and things like that on hostile forces, structure and plans. So you could have the same thing, but HVT execution, so an assassination mission, literally just to kill the commander, but obviously he's got a load of goons around him, for example, so you've got to try and maybe get through them or try and sneak through them to get to him. Asset extraction, so like embedded intelligence assets have been compromised and required to check in for regular intel or debriefs. Close target reconnaissance, so kind of non-kinetic covert observation on suspected enemy locations to build larger intelligence pictures kind of for direct action missions. I really like that one. So those kind of missions can actually give you intel for further missions later on down the line. I like that one. Sabotage, so hacking enemies' communications, things like that, destroying fuel and ammo stockpiles. Subversion, so missions where the focus is to sow distrust between supporting enemy forces and using like info war and psyops to affect enemy forces morale. I love that one. FOB defense, so small missions that are triggered when in like forward operating bases or smaller patrol bases, or whether it's your safe houses, like where superior enemy forces will attack and try and overrun your position. So you could have like training local indigenous forces, the time spent training the new whatever it is that the people on the ground there they're used. You could have a friendly force, and you're using tactics and things like that to help them, support them on their mission, which makes them better as the game goes along, and you get kind of rewards or whatever for helping them. Stealing vehicles, we've had these before, but they're always interesting as long as they're done right and they're not just kind of rinse and repeat the same thing over and over. You can make them interesting. So sensitive document retrieval, so covert missions where it's all, maybe the focus is on stealth, for example, securing and extracting sensitive digital and analog information, enemy plans, things like that. Diversion missions, so missions where your team will attack a secondary objective, drawing enemy reinforcement in the region to your location so that another element can conduct their mission with minimal enemy on target, things like that. So then we've got maybe a few extra ones like human trafficking kind of missions. So you could see like raid suspected confirmed safe houses to rescue civilians who are being held as human slaves, things like that. Gun running missions, so information from different sources, CIA, etc., about potential weapons caches stashed around the country, and you'll be to raid these things and to grab the weapons, etc. That could give you new guns in the game, things like that, or even new like secondary weapons. So like maybe if it's to do with drugs, you could actually have some drug smuggling missions where the core thing is to actually stop the drugs being smuggled out of the country, where they're trying to transport them. Stopping the transportation of those drugs out of the country could be good. And like counterfeiting operations, so that there's that they're working like authentic kind of US minting plates and machines that's disappeared during like things like the Iraq War or something like that, that you've got to kind of hunt these down or whatever. They're quite detailed, some of these missions, but it would just imagine if you had all of these and the things that you could then do with it. The kind of interesting, you could have faction missions. If you had, let's say you had 10 of these or 15 of these, if you had a rotation of 15 on there were, say, I don't know, 40 different bases on a rotation, you'd find that they wouldn't get boring so quickly. They could be really interesting, because different bases might work really well for some of these missions and be really difficult for one, and they'd move around so much. It'd take so long before you found the same mission again. And the chances maybe you even being on that day when it gets to its rotation, you really would get to play out so like hundreds of scenarios in different bases, and it would never get boring. And of course, there's the mission creator as well, which we'll probably do a separate video on. I've done a video on mission creator before, if you want to check that out, but I'll probably look at it again because I want to go into a bit more detail. So yeah, I mean, we'd love to know what you think. Please let us know in the comments below. What kind of missions do you want? How do you want it structured? The types of missions. Have we missed out any good ones? Sandy, what do you think about some of these? You've come up with a lot of these ideas too, and listening to what the community had said during surveys and things like that, where we got some of these from. What do you think? You got any others as well?
There was one that was discussed to me recently, and it was because this is part of an overarching thing for something else, but that we're going to cover later. But one of the things that was mentioned was things like recovering tanks, friendly forces tanks that have been basically put out of action whilst being engaged. And one of the missions would be to give cover support for that asset to be extracted, so the actual vehicle being extracted under fire, which I think just adds a different bit. Adds something different again, because it's not just a person. This time, you're talking about a team that runs that tank, and then the actual thing itself.
Yeah, I like the idea of that. Do you know what else I like? Is maybe something to do with your AI teammates. Having to kind of have mission structures where you actually have to utilize your AI, where you have to use them. If they're going to go out their way and give us great AI teammates, which is what we're hoping, they may as well actually make some missions where, even if you like playing it solo, make at least 2 or 3 missions where you absolutely have to have them. You can't turn them off. Just to give everyone that little bit of an experience. I know people might go, oh, I don't like the idea of not turning it off. But okay, maybe the first time you play it, you have to use them. And then afterwards, once you've played it, you want to replay it, you can turn them off as normal. But I think just to get people, if they do a great job with it, it would be nice to see them kind of structure some missions around it. So have you got anything else?
The other big thing, so all the missions that we've discussed here, the main reason I looked at stuff like that was because there was so many complaints with Breakpoint about the archipelago missions and stuff like that had nothing to do with the main game. They were nothing that a tier 1 operator would do. So everything here is based on things you would expect to see a tier 1 unit doing in country. It's all military based tier 1 operator type missions.
Yeah, that's really important.
That's what this game is. That's what Ghost Recon is, especially you said it yourself when you read about the non-kinetic close target recce's. Actually going back to its roots and recceing locations before you attack it.
100%.
It
Definitely.
just gives that feel.
Yeah, 100%. So those are some of our ideas. We are going to be doing some more videos where we go through your comments in detail. This will be an interesting one when we get round to doing this. So whatever ideas you've got, let us know, or jump on the Discord and let us know, and we'll put those in and we'll do a longer video going through other people's ideas. But until then, we will be back with more of these in the coming weeks. We've got a couple of really interesting special videos that hopefully you might see in the next few weeks. But until then, from me and Sandy, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Take care, and we'll see you again on the next one. Bye-bye.